Hello. This video is going to be the first in quite a few videos surrounding the topic of emergency bags and bug out bags. I had a friend ask me to do a video on this, and the scenario that she came up with was, I'm going to be referring to my notes by the way, but basically a natural disaster. So she says, what do I need to put in my bag for me and my family in the case to prepare for a natural disaster? So the topic of this particular video is sort of just going to be an introduction on what your physical needs are that you need to take into consideration before you even start to pack. So what are your physical needs? Well, there's the big three. The first one is hydration, water. So you can only live about 3 days without water. Here in Arizona, probably a day and a half if you're really physically exerting yourself with no water when it's 120 degrees. You'd be lucky to squeeze out 2 days. So the question is, how do you solve the water problem in the case of a bug out bag? Well, the first thing, of course, is you do want to bring some water on your own. So you just have to realize that a 1 gallon of water weighs roughly 8 pounds. So 1 gallon a day is what you need if you're really physically exerting yourself. So you probably should figure 2 gallons of water just to start out with. And that is a very heavy burden. Believe me, I've done that. I've hiked with that, but it's what you need. And remember, in this scenario of a bug out bag, we're not really talking about walking with that on your back. You're talking about throwing it in your car and taking off. So it's not going to be, unless things really went to hell in the handbasket, you would not be carrying that amount. You'd be simply transporting it to your car. So bring your water, that's one. The other thing is there's a tool called a Silcock key, and I will show you that tool in another video when I go through my bug out bag. It's basically a key that you use to access water spouts or spigots that are on buildings or drinking fountains that are locked out. You can turn them on with this particular key. And so you can, in a very bad situation, you can scavenge around different buildings, fill up the water using their water spouts. The other option for water is, you need to be able to condition water that you happen to run across. So whether that be a water filter, chemical water tablets, chemical water chemicals, and so forth. So filter, chemicals, and then in a really worst case scenario, boiling water. You can definitely do that. If you didn't have a Silcock key, you didn't have any way to condition your water with chemicals, you can always boil your water, and that is 100% effective if you do it for the, I believe it's 8 minutes, 10 minutes. I'll put that burden on you to find out how long it is, but boiling is the third option. So we have water. Your second need is food. Now you can go 3 weeks without food, for sure. People have done it, they do it all the time in fasting, but you're going to be pretty freaking miserable. So I would say prepare to bring some food into your bug out bag. So you want food that has a long life expectancy. You don't want to throw, fruit and cheese and milk in the back of your backpack and expect to last very long. It's going to become rotten, and it's going to make you sick if you try and eat it. So things like MREs, dried foods, canned foods, anything that has a long shelf life. And remember, if you do bring canned food, you need a way to open the can, so a can opener. But I'll get into the tools as we progress. This video here is just more of an overview of to kind of condition your mind to think about the needs, physical needs. The third need, people would often call that shelter. I'm going to broaden that out. I'm going to say you need a way to control your body's core temperature. You don't really need shelter in the sense of a structure, because there are people that live homeless in extremely adverse climates, cold and hot. But the reason why they're able to survive is they're able to control their body's core temperature. How do you do that? Well, when it's hot, it's a lot harder to control your body temperature when it's, in my opinion, when it's hot. One of the ways, of course, is drinking tons of water, but also things like clothing. Clothing is your first line of defense, whether it's hot or cold. So a wide-brimmed hat, you need to prepare for that. The type of hat that you see that construction workers wear when they're outside, it's wide-brimmed, it covers your neck, covers your ears, face. That does wonders in protecting you from the heat. And believe me, I know, because I work construction, and without that, you know, you're looking at heat stroke. The other piece of clothing is just, and this may sound counterintuitive, but long sleeve shirts. White shirts. In the summer, when I worked for construction, I saw these, you know, a lot of Mexicans working when they had long sleeve shirts. I said, what the hell is going on in this? Why are they doing that? And I asked them. They said, you try it one time and you won't ask that question again. It protects you. It acts like an insulator from the sun, and it also keeps the sweat and water on your sweater, so it keeps you cool. It's like an evaporative cooler. And then the other thing is a tarp. So if you're in a situation where you're having to stay in one place for a long period of time, attaching a tarp going from your vehicle down to the ground, if you were sit under it with some chairs, you know, it's going to be a lot more pleasant, and it could keep you from heat stroke also. Okay, so we've dealt with too hot. Now, what if it's too cold? Well, again, clothing is the first line of defense. In my opinion, it's easier to stay warm when it's cold because you can layer up. And you know, you just have a base layer and you add as many layers on as you can. Wool is very good to have too in case it's rainy or wet. If you get wet, wool retains a lot of its heat retaining capacity when it gets wet. So wool, and then just in general dressing in layers, or bringing layers with you in your bag. So we dealt with clothing, and also just a tarp also in this context. It may not seem like it would be that effective when it's extremely cold, but it keeps the wind off you and it can retain some heat. If you get, you know, if you set the right tarp setup and you have enough bodies in there with a fire at the front of it, it's going to keep you more warm than you would think. The other is a low temperature sleeping bag. I carry a 0-degree sleeping bag in my truck. I leave it in the back of my toolbox because if I was caught out, you know, and I couldn't come home, that sleeping bag is always there. So a low degree temperature, low temperature sleeping bag would be the next item. So, and then a fire kit. So I'll go into the particular components of a fire kit later on, but right now I just want to you to think in the mindset of how do I protect myself from cold. Well, one option is fire, and you need to have a fire kit, which is going to include 3 different types of fire starting devices. We have a lighter, we have matches, and then we have a ferrocerium rod. Ferrocerium rod, you've seen it no doubt. You strike it, it showers sparks, and when it's when those sparks go onto something like a Vaseline covered cotton ball, you have a way to start a fire that doesn't need an open flame. You just use that spark. And so food, water, shelter, or in this case controlling your core body temperature. Those are the first 3. The 4th one is going to be any medications. So of course prescription medications, but also things that you might envision yourself needing to make life easier, such as nasal spray, in my case, sleeping pills. I mean, I have prescription sleeping pills. You know, that's going to help a lot with trying to get to sleep if you're in a very stressful situation. And any other medications like cold medication and so on and so forth. So this video again was just intended to give you a way of thinking about, you know, what are my needs, my actual physical needs, and that's before I do anything else. I just need to evaluate what my needs are. So I've given you some things to think about. These are things that I've thought about. In the next video, series of videos, I'm going to progressively add to this discussion with other videos. Thanks.